Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. The NFTs from digital art to business engagement to marketing and beyond. So we're going to introduce our speakers. We're kind of going to go over that NFT 101 for some of you might be a little bit more advanced, but some of you might just be beginning in this. We want to show you how to think differently about NFTs, even if you do have some knowledge about where they are right now. We're going to show you some proof ups for marketing, and then we're going to talk about what's next. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and have our panelists introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. I'm Chris Spears, Managing Director for Improve HX. It's really just a new consulting venture. I spent the last 20 years in marketing technology, leveraging web platforms and CRM systems and email marketing tools to do consumer engagement from a digital perspective, helping some of the biggest brands in the world figure out that tooling and how it should work inside of their businesses. In the last 2 years, I became so enamored with blockchain and just what I think is possible in this category that I exited that business and am now solely focused on how blockchain is going to create the same type of revolutionary experiences that the internet did. I really think of it as it's 1999 and we get to do it all over again, except this time it's blockchain. So, 2 years in, I really enjoy this topic because the change and the shift that I typically go through when I have these conversations with folks is you got to stop thinking about everything blockchain is a financial asset and start thinking about how it applies to the business. So this is the first of many content pieces that we'll put out that talk about that. Andrew?
Yeah, well, you may not recognize me from the picture, so how about now?
You got to reverse it.
Looks like I'm punching myself in the head. I'm Andrew Dietz, and together with my colleague Natalie Springfield, who's also on the line, we have a firm called Creative Influence. We do marketing strategy, public relations, content, thought leadership to help companies grow reputation, revenue, relationships. And one way we look at content is in a very broad way, and we encourage our clients to do the same, more than just written material that could be, let's say, downloaded online. Their content has a very, sort of a very broad playing field, from events and activities to all kinds of different media, video and sound and so on. So a very broad picture. And our interest today is in kind of redefining what NFTs can be, showing a much broader playing field for marketing. If we can help our clients get ahead of the game on that, we can give them some advantage.
Hey, Jake Weaver. I guess I ran into Chris 15 years ago. Our last companies collided. I did run, still have a software company called Co-Design. We do very large enterprise intranets, and been a technologist my whole life. Got into crypto blockchain 2016 ish, and had one of the first and largest Bitcoin mining businesses here in Atlanta. Went away from the space for a couple of years, came back at the end of 2019, formed a couple more blockchain companies. Binary Frontiers, kind of my consulting investment vehicle to other companies. And then where I spend most of my time is a company called Crypto Manufacturer, which is an infrastructure provider in the blockchain space.
Great. Thank you all. And I do just want to say, if you all could mute yourselves, except the panelists, obviously. This will be an interactive participation, though, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question and jump on in with that question at any time, or you can use the raise your hand feature, and then we'll call on you. With that, what is an NFT? Andrew, I believe you're going to take us through that.
Yeah, okay. That's a daunting task, but so I guess, if the NFT, the first word is non-fungible, right? And what does that mean? That's the tough one. Well, so let's just clarify what that is or isn't, and that'll set us up for the rest. Something fungible is something that is interchangeable. It can be traded or exchanged one for one with something else without really being able to tell the difference necessarily between those two things. And non-fungible is referring more or less to something that's unique, that can't be replaced with something else, that has some amount of uniqueness and scarcity to it. And when it comes, and the idea of token is to take something and take its sort of digital form, let's say data that makes that up or represents it, and bundle that up and secure it in a way that can be owned, transferred, with a certain level of certainty. And you could, so when you look at NFTs so far, a lot of what people have done with them is to take digital art and represent it in an NFT or music or in-game items and videos. But there are other uses as well. It could, an NFT token can represent something digital. It can represent something physical in the real world. And I think most important for marketing, it can represent an experience, a hybrid of something online, something in real life, and some service wrapper. So the experience is more than the thing.
Yeah, and let me chime in here. I think a good point to articulate here, like something like a Bitcoin in the blockchain space is fungible. You can take one Bitcoin and you can break it down to 9 decimal places. And that works great for digital currencies, assets. But when you talk about like a song that an artist might make, you don't want to necessarily break that down in infinite pieces and have it spread out over the world. You need that whole song to be packaged together as one item that itself could trade, but not the individual pieces can trade on. And so that's really where the difference between a fungible token, non-fungible, one can be broken down many times over. One has to stay representative of the original form that it was launched in or created in.
Yeah, thought clear as mud.
Exactly.
We're open to other interpretations from folks on the line.
I think to get to how NFTs came to exist, we'll take a little step back to decentralized tech, right? So, the idea of the blockchain and Bitcoin being the first one that really created this, right, is a history lesson. Bitcoin came out and it was, distributed ledger technology. And I think that just needs to be simplified down to it's a public immutable database, right, that is spread around to computers all over the world. So everybody ends up with a copy of what's in that database, and everybody validates that the other copies of the database are accurate, and they expose that in a way that everybody can see it. And that's what the idea of decentralized, distributed ledger technology is. That's what the blockchains are built on. That's what Ethereum is built on. That's what Solana is built on, is that same kind of distributed database. Immutable in this, is when I write something to that ledger, it never leaves the ledger, right? So there's some really interesting privacy concerns there. If, Jake publishes his social security number and out to the ledger, there's no way to really get rid of it. So I think there's going to be some elements that come out of that. But then the blockchain came along, right? So, Bitcoin was kind of dumb. It was transactions. You could push things around. Ethereum, Solana, some of the other blockchains that have come along behind that have said, well, let's take this distributed database and give it the ability to host contracts so that we can write code that then create things like programmable money and NFTs. And Jake, I think you're going to kind of pick it up here and kind of walk us through, now that we've got smart contracts on the blockchain, how that involves into, Web3 and
yeah, Web3, and that wasn't a concept that first came out. Originally when Bitcoin came out, and the thing that attracted me to the whole space is it was a single topic, which is, for the first time, we had a way to provide scarcity digital objects. And, from a technologist standpoint and people that have been in this space, we've been able to replicate digital items over, time and time again, a million different ways. And really only in very closed systems can you keep something in truly scarce quantity, but you don't have that for the world. And that's what blockchain brought to the world. But then, it started to become more clear that this is really the next version of the web that's coming out. And those of us that were around, like Chris said, for 99 and, saw the internet in later stages than we are today with blockchain, we saw these same kind of things being invented. So Web3 is just a new way the web is going to function. And there'll be all sorts of cool little things that happen. For instance, there's a wallet concept in blockchain, that you have a wallet, and that's where your assets are stored. If I go to a website today, it connects to my wallet. I'm not creating a different login for 1,000 websites. And anybody now that we are 30, 40 years in the internet knows how creating a login for 70,000 sites, I mean, it's so unmanageable over time. This takes your identity, it gives it back to you, it follows you around the web, and it gives you control over that identity, those digital assets, those digital representations of things, which leads to a lot of concepts like Facebook's not going to own your data someday, and you're going to have certain rights to your own money that you don't have today. People can't shut you out of using your own money and things like that. And it'll truly give you access to digital items. NFTs are being used for artwork today, but in the future, it's going to be contracts for, a deed to a house or your car insurance or things like that. And it's just a much easier way to manage those things in the future. And there's lots of examples we can go into later.
So that was the brief history of, right? And, I think what made this, Jake can expand on this, like when NFTs and the template that was first produced and kind of envisioned, it was very business use case. And then what mainstreamed NFTs are Bored Ape Yacht Club and Gary Vaynerchuk releasing V's friends, and literally billions of dollars floating back and forth in an ecosystem in a matter of 12 months. I think we've got some of those statistics, right, Jen, where it's there's something like, if you had, I don't remember it off the top of my head, right? It's like $50 billion in the last 6 months has traded back and forth of NFTs. So that's what's popularized this, right? That's why, people are getting on the call saying we need to do an NFT, and we're getting calls that say, help me do an NFT. But when it's a brand, it's not as easy for a brand to produce a piece of art that then people are going to clamor to collect.
Well, yeah, Chris, you said it when you said, this is the first thing that happened because there was no use. There was nothing in today that digital artists could make that was this available to people. Like if you're talking about redoing, contracts for legal or deeds to houses, those are industries that have been around for a very long time. They're going to take a long time to change. Digital artists never had a tool like this, a royalty rewards thing like this ever to exist. And it's really important to note here that one of the concepts in NFTs or NFTs specifically for digital art, digital music, is you can assign a royalty to it and you can be paid forever on the sale of that thing. So if Picasso created a Picasso and it was in this new modern era, his family could be getting paid the royalties every time that's sold indefinitely. And that is such a powerful concept for copyright and being paid on your artwork that's out there in the world. And that there was no barrier to entry of this. It was the first thing because it was obviously a market gap that was not being filled.
So just to clarify too, what you look at what's on the screen here and you go, well, is a cartoon of a chimp art, and then there's also the question of, is an NFT only art that's only available in digital form, or could it be a digital representation of a physical piece of art as well? And the answer is all of the above. But what's especially interesting in the art scene is that something called generative art, for example, which is art basically produced by a computer algorithm, is unique for this kind of environment. So just like when people used to make web pages in the 90s that were meant to copy a magazine page, and now they've evolved to be native, to take, to create visuals that take advantage of what the internet's all about, not just replicate something in the real world. The same is happening with art. So,
and last point, I think, just to tie up there as it applies to marketing, since it's what this is about. If you go back to that screen, it might seem dumb, the images that you see, but when you realize that this is really a community that's formed. Gary V has now a community of people that own these V friends. They can market directly to them. They can entice them to buy other stuff. You are just basically building, these are community badges, if you will. This is a way to say, I support this brand, I support this product, I'm going to push this product, I'm going to be an advocate for this product. And that's really in this space, something that's a big concept is the users of these things tend to be part of the marketing team that goes along with it. So you might be producing content that's consumed and facilitating a larger marketing objective with this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point we're going to come back to for sure. That idea of community and identity as well. Yeah.
As we move through, right? I mean, you kind of hit on the community, and I think that's the first thing that the three of us would say back to a brand that calls and says we want to do something with NFTs. Well, tell us about the community that you have built that you're going to roll out a piece of digital art to, that they're going to want to buy so that they can prove that they're a part of that community. And as we continue to have that conversation, right, we had to shift to what are the other utility plays for NFTs, right? I think the Super Bowl is a great example of get a digital representation of your ticket, prove that you were there, but also get exclusive content, right? Starbucks is going to roll something out here soon. They haven't really revealed many details. Hopefully it's more than just a different way to get, songs and artist content, and that they actually come up with some type of utility to go along with their program. But in that think differently vein, as we continued to brainstorm on this, we started to leverage the language of, proof of, and it's, proof of entertainment, right? And kind of, did you buy that album when it was first released, or are you the second buyer? Because you can see that chain of custody on the blockchain. Did you actually do, participate in that fundraising and don't just claim that you did? Hot Wheels has one for their new cars that are coming out, right? If you've been to Barrett, if you've ever watched a Barrett Jackson auction, they're doing NFTs around their collectibles now. So I think people are looking for ways to leverage NFTs to capture the marketing, kind of the hype around it today. But as you continue, some of what you'll see and what we're going to go through is how do you apply utility to these things so that they're not just, catchy marketing terms that your brand is associated with. I think we've hit on a lot of these. So, Andrew or Jake, if you have something to add, I think identity is a big one. The more that we can, have an image that tells a company who we are without us having to give them a first name, last name, birthday, social, blah, 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 blah. A new term that has been getting kicked around, and I don't think made it into this deck, is a soul-bound token or a soul-bound NFT, meaning you don't ever transfer it, right? It's more like your birth certificate than it is a piece of digital art. Ownership of things, and we've talked about art, but as we get into the later screens, it's going to be real estate and vehicles and, business ownership, could be represented at NFTs. And then authenticity, right? I think Jake, maybe you can weigh in on some of this as it relates
I was
to
going to say,
like, there's nothing out there that prevents me from taking a picture of a Picasso.
I was just going to say
an NFT around that.
The funny thing is, you say that, and that's true, right? There's nothing that keep you from taking a screen grab and putting it up there. But there is a difference between the real one I have that's shown to be transferred from the artist's address to mine. And then honestly, when you talk about the real use cases, like say Kings of Leon released that song and they wanted to have brand ambassadors that get paid 0.0001%. If you're the top, first 50 people that bought the album, you're going to get paid a fraction of every album sale that goes on from there as a brand ambassador. Sure, that thing could be copied, but the payout is going to be known from Kings of Leon to you. It wouldn't matter how many times somebody at that point tried to copy your thing over. They have the recorded sale of that on the blockchain. They can pay directly to that address. They know who the authentic owner of that asset is. So yes, and people ask that all the time. Well, I can just screenshot this and put it up. True, but now something like Twitter is making it that you have to put in your key to prove that you own the NFT to put it up. And you're going to see more and more and more of those systems come out that have a way, not only that anybody can verify it, but they can truly verify that the asset is yours.
Jake, so I think if you take that concept and you apply it to, every image you upload to Instagram gets, NFT'd, and it can only ever be on your account or you market as something that people are allowed to retweet, reshare and re-leverage,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
pass around. Like those kind of
stuff
things are
like
going to change
Getty-
those platforms.
Getty Images, like I hate to say it, there's going to be some very bad that comes with this too. Getty Images is going to be able to track down every person that puts an image up that didn't buy it directly from them and have a provable track that you didn't buy it from them. And you're not going to be able to take as much free stuff as you would have, which is kind of funny.
So, with a marketing hat on, when we think about proof, we think about, we've got to prove the value of what we're marketing to our audience or to our potential buyers, right? That's what everything from the product itself to our messaging has to demonstrate the value. And that's true for NFTs as well. But there's another component here, and that is there's a value in the proof itself to our marketplace. If we can help them through an NFT prove their expertise, prove their philanthropic efforts, prove their personality, prove their affiliation, their affinity, their membership, their engagement, and certainly their ownership. But we've started with ownership, but we want to get you to think beyond that alone, right? What's the value not only of owning something, but of the maybe time advantage you get from an NFT, first mover advantage, right? You get the first, you get access first to the new album, for example. Behind the velvet rope, access to real world activities, not just online. The value of status, of connections, of insights and ideas, all of which could be wrapped up and packaged in the form of an NFT. And which give you the right to own, to use, to leverage, to display, to brag about, et cetera. So as you think about marketing, think perhaps about the whole buyer journey, right? How can we use an NFT to build awareness? So a number of companies so far are doing just that, right? They're using NFTs as promotional gimmicks in a way. But there are other uses, right? So expertise is a great example. We do a lot of business-to-business marketing, and in business-to-business marketing, it's helpful to demonstrate your credentials, right? But how do we really know somebody has the credentials they claim they have, whether it's a law degree or whether it's, certifications in certain Microsoft technology or advanced credits or, anything that educational marketing might bestow upon us? How do we prove that?
I think of this very much as a trustless environment on the expertise category, right? So today I can go into LinkedIn, I can pick whatever college I want, whatever certificates I want. There's not really a credentialing, requirement there. So I think as you look to the future and you fast forward upon graduation, a student's going to be issued an NFT that they can upload to or, attach to LinkedIn, Career Builder, their resume that prove, without having to hunt down a transcript, or any of the other kind of rigmarole to determine if that was actually, a student at that time and got that grade with that, with that degree. An NFT will follow that person around, and you can kind of expand that across, medical, CPEs, continuing ed programs. As Andrew said, like imagine a wallet, right? We've talked about wallets so far that just hold physical financial assets, but imagine a wallet that is your credentials wallet. And it has all of the credentials that you've ever collected in one place from the issuer. That's a kind of powerful concept that changes the way that individuals and brands trust you.
Well, and it makes sense, right? The college is the issuer, they're the credentialer. So they have the onus on them to do it originally. But if LinkedIn were to be in the business of trying to verify everybody's credentials, I mean, their overhead would be so massive, it wouldn't be reality to do it. So when you flip it over to, you get the asset when the credentialer gives it to you. I mean, imagine a system where you graduate from college, they have your identifier, you log in, it's transferred to you, and then the other systems that you connect to just pull all that information in. You're not putting it in anywhere. Just like the logins following you around, those credentials will follow you around. So some of this, again, will just be an immutable piece of data that can't be changed or forged in the future.
And, again, it doesn't have to be, the big things. It could be as basic as, I showed up at all of the booths, or I went to these workshops at the business conference, right? And those companies that spend a fortune setting up exhibits and speaking and so on at business conferences want some sort of evidence of what actually happened, what paid off, and they want a way to stay connected to, the people who visited their booth or attended their workshop. So it works at that level as well.
Yeah, and Andrew, just on that, I will put in another piece that I can see in chat where some of that badging system is coming alive. This is one of my accounts that shows the events that I've been to in the past. I mean, this is an immutable record of conferences that I've been to, and can follow me around. So lots of little things coming up like this in the badging, credentialing side of the house.
Frank, I think that's a really interesting question about, why not just a W3C verifiable credential? Looking at, I wasn't familiar with W3C verifiable credentials. I just did a quick Google. I mean, it looks like they're doing a lot of the same thing, right? It's cryptographically stored. It's in the concept of a digital wallet. What I can't tell from my quick reading is if it is, publicly available, right? And once it's been issued, can't be changed, right? So there's probably a lot of overlap between how those two things are being done. But it's a good question, what prevented them from taking off, and will the hype associated with blockchain kind of overcome that, right? If it's issued as an NFT and kind of the marketing that is ramped up behind what an NFT is.
The trick is using the same database. I mean, for years and years, we've had the technology to make one login for multiple things, to make all of the SAP or all of the ERP systems talk, all of the financial system talk, and none of them do today because you can't get all these companies to agree on anything. And just like several other tech tricks in the past, I think this tech trick is it said, hey, we're all going to use the same database layer, and you just build on top of that. And it makes everything so much smoother that has been attempted before, but there's just no way to pull it off because you've got to have too many people agree on what that is.
So I know Jen's is
moving
us forward. I appreciate that. And, on the commitment side, I'll just give you an example. For nonprofits, they spend a lot of money on donor recognition. You gotta, as a nonprofit, spend something to help cultivate donors, and those that give big, get recognition, physical recognition, right? Plaques and things like that. But, it could be something else. It could be a token, which has, which not only is a demonstration or proof of their commitment or donors' commitment to a nonprofit, but also comes with certain other benefits, certain behind the scenes access, for example, things like that.
And again, Andrew comes at it from the marketing perspective. I'm going to think about it as the proof perspective. If I'm the Bezos Family Foundation, right, and I can put up my, donation wallet and it shows my donations that I've made, there's no real second guessing whether or not that organization is making those donations, right? When they rank the most charitable people and foundations in the world, right, they will go to a blockchain and pull that all down instead of, kind of everybody self-reporting and trying to compare that to the reports they get out of the charities themselves. So, I think of it as, and the fundraising side, there's kind of a double edge here, right? There's kind of the proof of commitment, but also, if I do if I'm the high and I do a deal with the artist to release a set of NFTs that also help raise money, right? That's both a proof of donation and a digital asset that I might find value in the future.
There you go.
I want to take a particular good look at this slide because we had several people that had written questions about fundraising. So if anybody on the call has extra questions about how this works with events, fundraising, donations, feel free to chime in.
So the other thing I want to just put out, Chris, is earlier, maybe before we started, I think you were talking about ESG programs and the role of NFTs. And ESG, is one of those topics that is at the top of the list of our clients, along with resiliency, which is a part of it, and other things like sustainability. But companies are challenged to demonstrate and prove that they've actually done what they said they're going to do. Can you talk a little bit about what you're thinking there?
I think that is almost more of potentially a blockchain use case than specifically an NFT use case. But the example that we had discussed was, the blockchain has this idea of validators, right? So I make a statement or I make a claim, and then I can reward a validator, whether that's a set of code that validates what I'm doing, or it's another human that goes, what Chris has just put on chain is accurate and represents them. And then those validators are rewarded, right? So what I could imagine in the future is, I make a statement around my ESG on the blockchain so everybody can see what I'm planning to do and then validate whether or not I actually did it over the course of the year. And then external parties can come in and validate that and be on the receiving end of validator tokens, validator NFTs. And it's just is that a blockchain for the sake of blockchain use case, or does it bring more value than a traditional model? I think the transparency of those kind of things in an immutable public database makes it, a better opportunity from an ESG perspective. But that's one way that I could see that unfolding.
Gotcha. So yeah, engagement is, we talked a little bit about that with regard to events. And I can't remember if we have a loyalty one of these coming up, but yeah, engagement and loyalty in some ways go together. Engagement is in part how often you're buying, how deeply you're really connected to the brand. And part of that is, can we provide proof of your actions that demonstrate that engagement? But again, that's where, I think an overlap with loyalty comes into play. And I think of my friend Ken, who's on the line, who does a lot of shopper marketing, but also does a lot of work in the cannabis sector, where, loyalty campaigns are, are high on the list. Is that a bad? Is that okay? Forgive the bad. Anyway, and anything you've seen there, or not quite yet?
Not quite yet, but I did see something out at MJ BizCon where a group was doing crypto and they also had NFTs associated with it, and it was all in that space. Mm-hmm. So it just depends. I don't know where they've gone from there, but there are groups that are looking at them. And I would say for brands, if they do create loyalty, I could see NFTs playing a role. And the loyalty program like Starbucks, I can see how that would give people who are part of a loyalty program some kind of extra value. Mm-hmm. And they might be able to work that into all types of loyalty programs. So I think that is could be a big deal from a marketing perspective, not that there's not other perspectives out there. Yeah. Like the education, or even with nonprofits. When you said nonprofits, we have a Classical Music Chicago nonprofit that we do work for, and their donors could absolutely, if we decided to, with this, webinar, I'm all of a sudden my brain's clicking going, wow, this would be a cool thing, because we have a design that could very well be put into an NFT, and then the donors could get it if they donate to Classical Music Chicago. So that would be very, very interesting. But this is all kind of new to me, so I'm still just pushing it in.
And I think loyalty is a really interesting one. I mean, to think about that donation platform, I think all of the topics that we have are still going to have an intersection with NFTs as digital art, right? So if I am in the loyalty category and I'm in the hometown of Atlanta and I'm thinking about Chick-fil-A, the pitch is I'm going to release an NFT that has some of the cows on it, and an exclusive number of those are going to be sold. And it's some kind of accelerator if you have this in your Chick-fil-A app when you buy products, that you get more points.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting from a loyalty perspective is, well, what if they also just sold those NFTs? And then every time I could buy some if I missed out on getting one because I wasn't at a store opening, or I didn't attend Cow Appreciation Day, or any other variety of events where they might hand out an NFT, but I could buy them, right? So now there's a marketplace for this where I could turn around and Jake goes, I've missed out on all of them, but he wants to buy my whole collection. And, that also generates revenue for Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because,
And
that's what I was going to say for you from a fundraising perspective, right? I think there's a yearly opportunity for nonprofits to produce NFT hand in hand with artists, celebrities, like pick your mix. And then a year from now, when that NFT changes hands, that charity gets another 5, 10, 15% pop on that change of hands.
and also, if you go out further into this, when liquidity is there for everything, there's even concepts being introduced now where when you pay for things, maybe Starbucks wants to give me points, but I go to, let's say, AutoZone, and AutoZone wants to give me points, but I can choose to get my points in Starbucks at AutoZone because there's a market that just swaps those for me because somebody else wants AutoZone points and I want Starbucks points. And it becomes a much more fluid system that these things get interchanged in, because they can go between any system. They're built on the same layer at the bottom that allows them to be transferred in that way.
And what's really interesting is that the consumer demand is what drives the value of that exchange rate. So if I wanted to trade my Delta Sky Miles for Starbucks points, it might be 1 for 1, or it might be 1,000 to 1, right? Like, it's not going to be controlled by the business. It's them giving up the freedom of those points. And that's the decentralized part of all of this conversation, right? Is that I now own it. I own my Starbucks points, and I can choose to use them, sell them, burn them, but they're not trapped in the Starbucks app. And that's the only place that they exist.
But, Ken, I'm glad that this is sparking ideas. That's the whole point of this conversation.
Yeah.
But I do want to also encourage everybody to think beyond the value of a collectible. Like, the NFT represents one thing, digital or real. It could represent an entire combination of things, activities, experiences, right? So it could be a bundle, and that bundle may not remain the same, but it gives you a right to something, a right to this collection of value, I guess, right? That the NFT represents. Jake, did that make any sense at all?
Yeah, no, it does. There's just so many business cases for it, in the future. I think of like really creative restaurants, because we work with a lot of restaurants, Arby's and Texas Roadhouse, and how important their brands are to them. But even things that they do internally with some of the companies that do artwork internally, and thinking of them, even going beyond like regular business. If you talk about like maybe selling their whole portfolio of artwork someday, in systems like this as well. It creates markets for a lot of things that didn't have markets before.
And now we've got to add a slide, because Jake just hit on, NFTs for employee engagement, right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
It is completely missing from this, right?
Which is you could call it HR, but it's increasingly important form of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we talk more about marketing, we had several questions about marketing as well. Sorry, I'm having a coughing fit. But I know that, if I can change this, I know that you guys have some examples. We talked about a few examples earlier, but innovative ways that brands are using NFTs right now. And to Chris's point, a lot of them are, in digital art form. But if you guys,
I was going to say, you've got to still have a strategy, right? It's not putting NFTs out for the sake of NFTs. Even in this, we did a call with a door manufacturer that, wanted help designing an NFT strategy. And the step back was, well, what's your consumer strategy? Because if you don't have that, it's not just, let's jump into an NFT and people are going to buy your door NFTs. And I think this is the same kind of thing, right? You as you wander through awareness, consideration, loyalty, you're going to have to understand what the consumer is looking for and why an NFT is going to be important, right? Is it a cash grab, right? Are you producing an NFT because you hope it goes up 100 million% like some of the digital art ones? Or are you producing an NFT because it actually drives new utility for your business? Are you producing an NFT because you are Arby's and, you're going to, every time you spend more than $100, you get another part of the barbecue. And when you have a complete barbecue, every time you go in, you get a free drink, and some of this, like, it's still the intersection of all the traditional things we've been doing, right? The difference is it's now in an asset that is transferable, right? I'm not sure, and proves that you did the thing that the loyalty was associated with, or the donation was associated with, or the degree was associated with.
So Samantha asked a question about use in B2B professional services, right? Because usually, so far, to the extent this has been used by brands, it's largely been used by consumer goods or services brands. But it certainly does, I think we've got to stretch our creative minds even further for B2B right now, but they will reveal themselves. But let me give you one example. NFTs are great ways, as Chris and Jake were saying earlier, to represent and build community, a sense of community. And there is value in that. Samantha's company, a professional services firm offering benefits to corporations, they do educational events and gatherings with their clients who are, chief administrative officers, or let's say heads of HR. Well, what if we had a special community formed, just for those heads of HR, and we issue them an NFT if they are of a certain prospect or client type, and that gives them unique, exclusive access to this small, intimate group of peers, facilitated by Samantha's company. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but that's an example. We do that in the consumer realm, but it works in the B2B realm as well with peer groups.
Partnerships too. I mean, I'm thinking about like two companies go into a new partnership, AT&T and Apple. And if you own those two NFTs, you're part of the partnership, and there's a special discount you get that applies to being loyal to this grouping of brands together for this particular thing they're doing. There's just going to be a lot of marketing unlock in that space of combining different promotions, different companies together, and then verifying that you have those as proof of your loyalty to the brands, and then getting some benefit that other people don't get.
Yeah. Samantha, I mean, for me, that really depends on the size of your firm, right? So, if you're the big, gigantic Accenture of the world, and Andrew has the NFT that says he's been a customer for a decade, when he calls the support line, he bumps to the front, right? Yeah. If you're a 10-person firm, that's a lot harder to do because there's just a lot less. And the other thing, I think that when we talk about consumers and NFTs, we can still attach the concept of value to the NFT. I don't think a B2B firm can attach value to an NFT without it be considered a bribe, right? I'm going to issue you a Bored Ape Yacht Club if you do work with me, looks a lot like a bribe and not a utility NFT. So I think there's probably going to be some real fine lines that get walked there.
I think the educational marketing piece, which is such an important part of B2B marketing, and the extent we talked about that before, access to thought leadership or demonstration of that's where it can be used more.
Yeah. Think about with Salesforce, right? Like if Trailblazer badges were all NFTs and you collected your, but that's not a new use case. It's just a digital but that goes back to that proof of expertise side, right? I've done all of Trailblazer certificates, so they're in my certificate wallet.
Jake, go ahead.
Some things can be done today that would just be much easier. When I think about we'll work with a big brand and they will act for rights to use their marketing material, maybe put up the logo on our website. Today they have no way to track if that marketing material is being used in the right way. And they really don't have a way to revoke it from me very easily. If like in the year, Jake's company screws us over completely when we want to retract all that, the marketing collateral we gave them to use. Yeah, I know it's peering out into the future, but at some point businesses will have the ability to turn on and off that stuff based on certain parameters of contracts and conditions that are met. And it won't be up for debate. It'll be a contract and programmable that'll run this. And so, maybe if you're late on your payments by, more than 90 days, it automatically goes in effect that you can't use a particular, marketing asset with that firm. It's just going to give a lot more control to these things in the digital world.
Great.
That might be a good segue to that. We had a few questions that were about outside of marketing, and we were talking a little bit about B2B. And I know, Jake, you had said originally was just core business. So could you go into just like, supply chain and how some of those other cases that probably will adopt this pretty quickly or already are?
Yeah. So I'm also invested in a company called Provide Services here in Atlanta. And in my original, I was worked at Accenture. I've spent 20 some years with enterprise. Like I only know big business. That's all I've done. And so my original, interest beyond, the decentralized nature of things were how are businesses going to use this. Provide is a company that is working on the enterprise space. The other use cases get so wild and so fun and so crazy on the supply chain. There's systems being set up, for instance, like for Coke, this was a POC that was done. You can read about it if you just look at Microsoft, Consensus, and Provide. But working on supply chain to fill orders from anybody that could fill a gap in their process, and building systems that basically allow trust to be evolved over time. Things that will flip the RFP process on its head, actively putting out an RFP and attracting people to it versus like a spray and pray. And then the really cool thing that I was a part of was using the public blockchain to verify the authenticity of data between two systems. So you could be using Microsoft Excel for your financial system. I could be using QuickBooks, and I can verify that we have the same entry in both systems without those two systems ever being linked up together. It's some really cool stuff. So Salesforce is working on some automatic like fulfillment stuff that would just happen, SOWs that can be created and automatically tracked between two disparate systems. It's for B2B, there's going to be some really cool stuff on the financing and invoicing side. You're going to get invoice refactoring that's done at a scale that you wouldn't have to go out and find a company that will refactor those invoices. You'll be able to sell those on the open market based on the quality of the company selling them. Will yield a higher yield on selling those invoices to the open market. You're going to get payment terms and contracts that finally won't screw over small businesses. Also on the other side, payment terms that have to be met or discounts that automatically get applied. I mean, there's so many use cases in the future for how all of this connects together. And a lot of it boils down to everybody's on the same base layer system. That's it. That's really the trick of it all, is that if we all agreed today on the same database we were using, all these things would be possible, but we're not. We're using 15 billion different technologies and different tools to do these things.
Yeah. I've also seen some interesting use cases. So there's a couple of companies that are basically the Internet of Things synced to the blockchain, right? So interesting use cases around that become health data as it reports back to your insurance company to give you premium discounts, transparency data so that you can eliminate corruption on a gas supply line, because at every bend of the pipeline, it's reporting the volume that passed through it, and nobody's leaking, gas out to go sell on it, the way that it comes out of the oil system. So there's just, as Jake said, having an underlying agreed upon data layer is going to create a lot of advantage. The mortgage industry right now spends hundreds of millions of dollars recertifying the PDFs you send them between when you originate and when you get funded and when they decide to sell it and when the buyer buys it and then when they do it again. It's rescanning thousands of pages of PDFs because they don't have a shared data layer. Good stuff.
Fractionalization of assets too. And one classic example is, if you own an Airbnb in the Cayman Islands and somebody can only afford a little crappy property and a very rich person can afford the mega mansion, statistically that mega mansion, even though they're on the same place, yields a much higher return than the crappy little place. fractionalizing that asset so that you could have an entire group of people buy fractional pieces of that Airbnb instead of the whole thing, allow somebody that can put in less money to the system but get the same benefit of owning the higher reward property. So I mean, it just goes on and on. It'll change everything.
Jen, you got,
Eventually,
I was
I'll
just
talk
gonna
forever.
say,
Just
we'll
mute me,
pontificate on
Jen.
future calls.
Mute me, Jen.
I was just gonna say, Jake mentioned Salesforce, but just to like give everyone some examples of the B2B side, companies like Ford, Louis Vuitton, Walmart, Amazon, you know, they're all big companies, but they are already using NFTs for these things. A lot of them in the supply chain, making sure that they're not selling, you know, counterfeit goods, or making sure that things are coming with it. So things are already being used in that.
It's across the board though. It's not just, you know, not just the big brands.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've you know, Chris, you've just putting this out there into the world has stirred up a bunch of mid-sized companies that have reached out and said, well, I can't make it necessarily, but I'm really interested in talking about this. And, you know, again, they're everything from, you know, the sort of boutique alcohol brands, the craft brands, I mean, to mid-market, mid-sized restaurant chains, you know, et cetera.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about accessibility to smaller companies? And because it is true that, you know, that a lot of research I'm doing is that you can, you know, test these out for minimal cost.
You know, I think Justin put a link in the chat window about Salesforce. That to me is an example of how things are moving to make all of this more accessible for regular humans. Right? Not just the tech, you know, super behind the scenes tech savvy early adopters. So, you know, if given what we're seeing with Salesforce, et cetera, this is beginning to change the kind of the user accessibility, you know, the ease of use, I guess, of the whole system. But I think Chris and Jake may have more on that because, you know, you may see more of what's happening behind the scenes to make all this, I don't know, dummy proof.
Yeah, I mean, it's still just early. I mean, that's what everybody has to imagine and remember, that there was a point in time where you couldn't convince a business that they needed a website, and people did not see how you possibly were ever going to use a website for anything. And then you fast forward to today, and it's almost inconceivable a company would not have a website. That same thing is happening. So it's going to hit other sectors faster than others. It's going to hit other size of companies faster than others, but it is coming for everyone at some point.
The internet's just a fad. Buying things online will never happen. All statements we've heard, right? So appreciate the time. Again, sorry about the issues next week. We'll get better and better at these as we go through them. Reach out to us if you have any questions, you know, connect with us on LinkedIn. The next version of this that we're going to be doing is really going to focus in on the metaverse and some of the interesting use cases that we've seen there, you know, where we think that's all going. Your homework, if you haven't done it, is go watch Ready Player One for a very dystopian view of where that future is going to end up. And then for those of you in Atlanta, we're rebooting the Georgia Blockchain Coalition. So this was a group that was really active pre-COVID, had some great leadership involved, and then kind of slipped by the wayside as COVID happened. So as a group, we've joined forces, and we're reinvigorating that to start doing more content and in-person events around Atlanta. So if you are in the Atlanta area, go to the website, sign up to the newsletter. Jen will make sure that you stay in the loop on what we're doing around town. Jen, did I miss anything?
No, just thanking everybody for joining us today. And
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it, everybody. And
that is a recording.
Yeah.
Good deal.